So good morning all, and a very warm welcome to the next in our Transcend webinar series. One of the questions that we get as business advisors and working with a wide variety of businesses, both startups and existing businesses, is what is available in terms of grant money that we can use in our businesses. It's a never-ending topic and one that has enormous potential for businesses, but there also is no guarantee of grant money. We thought rather than us try and answer that question each time, we'd get an expert in this field, and I'm delighted to welcome Madonna Melrose this morning, who really is an expert in all things grants. I met Madonna, we were just saying, about 18 months ago at the Frankston Business Collective, where she delivered an educational session for us, which was incredibly well received. And the feedback after that was really very positive. So I thought no better than getting Madonna in to talk to us this morning to give you a background as to the scale of grants available, potentially what is available, and how to go about looking at those grants and applying for them. I'd also say that if you do need assistance with any of your grants, Madonna's details will be up on the screen as well. Please feel free to reach out to her, and I'm sure she will be only delighted to help you. So Madonna, thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning, and a very warm welcome. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jeff, and welcome to everybody. As I said, I can't see any of you, so I'm talking to a screen now. So I'm assuming there's people out there and you've all got wonderful, happy faces on. So big thank you to you too for showing up. This is for you and about you, and it's how you can grow your business. So very excited to be here, very honoured to be here. I love speaking about opportunities for business. And I'll mention the word business throughout today, but it does include non-for-profit. So I work in that non-for-profit sector and full profit, and also individuals. So grants cover many different areas of the community when it comes to business. So just remember that if there's a non-for-profit in the background there as well, then this information relates to you also. And I guess the most important thing is, like anything in business and in life really, is to be ready. There's a wonderful saying, I'm getting ready to be ready. Because are we ever really ready? Things change and move and flow so quickly these days. But a really important thing, and one thing that I really talk a lot about to clients and potential clients, is about being grant ready. Are you grant ready with your grant mindset? And is your business grant ready with its paperwork and its due diligence? So we'll go through that today and just make sure that you have the correct grant mindset around applying for grants. And as Jeff said in the beginning, there is no guarantee of success in the grant landscape. It is a competitive landscape. But it's like buying a lottery ticket. It's like, oh, I never win the lotto. It's because I never buy a ticket. So same as grants. It's like, oh, I never get any grant money. It's like, well, have you applied for any? And you hear about your competitors possibly getting, great success with their grant applications. So very much, as I said, getting you grant ready today and really hitting home with that wonderful grant mindset. So today, as I said, I really just want to support you and educate you. I want to expand your horizon, and there could be some misconceptions about the grant landscape, that it is a minefield. That's not a misconception, that is true. But if we break it all down, it can be quite a wonderful tool to add to your arsenal of business. So that's today. Very much just want to educate you and help you have a better understanding of the grant landscape. And the best way to start off is to actually find out, well, what are government grants and programs? You hear about them, as I mentioned, you hear about your competitors being successful with government grants and accessing funding. But grants are broken down into two areas. They are programs and also funding. But most importantly, grants are basically a way for government to enact their policies. So they're delivered industry and also activity-based. So certain industries are funded, but then activities within that industry are funded as well. And as I mentioned before, I'm talking here about for-profit business and also that non-for-profit space as well. Currently, there's $80 billion on the table. So just visualise that for a minute. There's $80 billion piled up in $100 notes. That's there for you to put your hand in and have some. There's currently about 3,900 grants and programs available. I have seen these figures as high as $105 billion at a certain point, and I have seen over 7,000 grants and programs available. So the important thing about the grant landscape is that it is ever changing. Any given day, these figures can fluctuate quite a lot. We can get anywhere from one grant to over 50 new grants come across our desk every day. So it's this constant changing landscape. So that's why it's even more important to be grant ready, because you need to strike when the opportunities actually hit you. But there's some pretty big figures, and I'd get you to put your hands up if you wanted a bit of that, but I can't see you. So I'm sure you'd all put your hand up just a little bit, just 1% of that 80 billion. That'd be enough. But very staggering, less than 35% of Australian business actually apply for grants. So picture that 80 billion again. 65% of you are walking past that table and not dipping your hand in. So that staggers me. That's like, oh my God, you know, we've got to help, we've got to educate, we've got to let people know, excuse me, that there is this bucket of money available for you, and we're going to do our best to help educate you this morning so that you're in a really strong, solid, confident position for next year to put your hand up for some of this money. It's yours. You're entitled to it. I often say I'm the modern day Robin Hood. I'm robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. So I'm taking your money back from government and handing it back to you. That's what I like to do. So the grant mindset, we've spoken about it, but what actually is it? So grants fund special projects. They don't fund your core day-to-day activities within a business. For example, I had a lady call me yesterday and she said, I'm just wondering if there's any grants out there for me. And I said, can you tell me what you want the money for? And she said, I need to paint my office. I've just moved into a rental property and I need to give it a lick of paint. And that is something that will never be funded. So it's not about those core basic day-to-day activities that your business should be doing on your own and that you should be supporting your business to do. It really is about special projects, and we'll dive deeper into that now. So ask yourself, how would grant success for you have a positive flow-on effect? That positive flow-on effect could be in the community, it could be ecosystems of other businesses around you, it could have a wonderful positive impact on a regional town or facility. So we're now taking ourselves a little bit broader. So instead of grants being a quick cash grab, a quick overnight, oh my God, I can't pay wages, what am I going to do? And it's not about, I want money because I want to do this. Take the I out of it and consider, my business wants some money because, yes, I want to grow, of course, but if I grow, I'm going to have this beautiful flow-on effect to other businesses around me, to the community that I live in, to the area that I work in. So it's about that really beautiful flow-on effect. So when you take that I out of your approach to the grants, then it can really help you now switch your thinking and your mindset. So being grant ready is imperative, and there's so many advantages to being grant ready. And grants, as I mentioned before, they are highly competitive. So the only two given grants are the Research and Development Tax Incentive and the Export Marketing and Development Grant. And I'll talk about those a bit later. They're known as given grants. It's your money. If you've spent it on eligible activity, you're entitled to it back and you're not competing with someone else. But the grant space we're talking about today is that competitive space. So there is no guarantee of success. But once again, you've got to be in it to win it. And if your competitors are being successful, then why can't you? So being grant ready is really important. First reason is that grants have a very short time frame for submission. So making sure you have your documentation ready is key. So what's your business plan like? Does it really articulate your goals and your vision? When was the last time you looked at your business plan? I know myself, hand up, guilty. I've got it in the top drawer there. But business plans do change quite often, like many times your business plans will change throughout the year. Your strategic plans may change, even your marketing plans as well. But having something, a ready document in place that can change as you grow and morph and change your business is really important, but really making sure that you have those documentations in place. And do you have a clear narrative that demonstrates not only where your business is now, but where it wants to go and how it's going to get there? It's really important. Always know where you are now. Nice to know where you've come from, very important, but not so much in the grant space. It's more about where you are now, but the real focus on where are you going to go in the future? Where is your business dream? Where's your business goal? How are you going to get there? How is it going to be funded? That's a really important step in this grant mindset. So identify a project that really supports your vision and it has that flow-on effect. And be very mindful too that with a grant application, if you are applying for, say, an amazing sustainability, renewable ecosystem grant, and people go to your website and your messaging on LinkedIn and your socials, and they're disconnected, then that's not a good sign. That's not a good place to start with, because you will be checked out. Your socials will be checked out, your businesses will be checked out, your websites will be looked at. And if your messaging in the grant application doesn't marry and isn't succinct with the messaging of your business, then that will be a real red flag. So you really need to make sure that your vision and your works have a really close connection. And identifying a suitable project, you need to make sure that you meet all the eligibility and assessment criteria. Every single grant, so of those 3,000, 4,000 or so grants that we identified, every single one of those grants will have a different assessment and eligibility criteria. So you need to know what they are and we can help you identify those. And if you don't meet those criteria, how could you? Is your project and is your business flexible enough that you could possibly bend and flow if there is a wonderful opportunity sitting there for you? So understand the detail and really stand out in the application process. Applying for grants is very much like a job interview. It's like, choose me, pick me, I'm the best for the job. You are selling yourself with these grant applications. So really understanding how your application can stand out. So funding available is allocated on a competitive process and a competitive basis. Excuse me. So I often say to people, how competitive are you? If you get rejected on the first grant, are you just going to lie down, give up, grants are a waste of time, couldn't be bothered? Or are you going to use that as momentum and energy to keep going? Because they are competitive. And don't expect to be successful in your first, second, even your third application. Use those first few applications as really great experience. And then how is your application going to address all the required outcomes and stand out from the others? So really consider that strongly before you apply for a grant. And that goes back to a previous slide about being grant ready, having your documentation in place. Because if a grant application asks you to attach additional information that might be interesting to us, don't leave that opportunity blank. Throw in your pitch deck, throw in a marketing plan, throw in a reference, throw in a list of your awards or your accomplishments or your achievements, throw in some of the community work that you may do. If they're asking you for this opportunity to add more information and expand on who you are as an individual, but also as a business that's applying, really make sure you take advantage of that so you can stand out from other grants, because the process is quite simple. It is, as I said, like a job interview. In come the applications, they read the first couple of lines or the first couple of questions, and that's where they're captured. So if you lose them, then you're going to go on the no pile, as opposed to, oh, that's quite interesting, I'll put that over here to consider. So it is that going through the list and either moving to the next stage or not. So really make sure that your application answers every single question correctly, but really stands out. How can you actually do that? So prepare and plan for success. This is really important. We touched on this a bit before, but having that supporting documentation ready. And that can be as many things as you need or think, but to have them up to date and ready is really important. So you don't want to be adding a business plan that was done 5 years ago for a grant that you're applying for now, because the alignment is going to be misaligned. So really plan and have your documentation ready, even to the point of, can you get your hands quickly on your financials? Can your accountant, or can you in the back end of your MyOb or Xero, can you print out a forecast, a 6-month financial forecast? Really understand what is being required here and make sure that you have that information on hand. So strategic plans, larger grants, you may also be required to what they call a co-contribution. So if you're asking for, say, 500,000, government, when I say the government may give you 250,000, but your project's going to cost 500. They're not going to give you 250 if you can't make up that other 250, because otherwise the 250 they give you is wasted, because the project's not going to happen because you're 250K short. So co-contributions are very important if you are going for those bigger, meatier grants and for higher values. So how do you have that in place? Is it a matter of, you have a drawdown facility, overdraft? Do you actually have savings in the bank? Have you been pre-approved for a loan? Do you have crowdfunding that can match with this? So making sure that with those bigger grants and those co-contribution grants, that you do have those financial projections ready. And also this is where you call in your accountants, your financial planners, because grants, as I mentioned before, can open and close very quickly. We get grants across our desk every day, could close at midnight Friday. So if after today I found an incredible grant for all of you to apply for, you tick all the boxes, all the eligibility criteria, all the assessment criteria, do you have all the paperwork ready so that you could meet that really short deadline? So that's really important, to be ready to fire the gun when you see these opportunities come across your desk. And that's why I often say have a grant plan that sits alongside your business plan, your marketing plan, your strategic plan, so you know where you're headed, where you're going at any given point or time. And if an incredible grant opportunity comes your way, you are ready to strike. And don't leave grant applications till deadline. Of course, we have had situations in the past where the system has crashed because everyone's left it to the deadline, so people have missed out. We've also had situations where that particular grant has been oversubscribed, so they cut applications off early. So don't just sit and wait and think, oh, I've got months until that one's ready. Be ready, be prepared, be solid, be strong, be really focused on your project, have all your supporting documentation, and fire it away as soon as you can. So maximise your funding potential. I spoke before about grants being funded based on business industry, but also business activity. So you may think, I just need money for, a manufacturing plant. Let's use that as an example. You think, I just want to find where I can get some money to help build this manufacturing plant. But think deeper, because once you've built the manufacturing plant and you may have received money from government to assist, you're going to need plant and equipment for that manufacturing plant. You're going to need new processes and processing lines. You may need new staff, new apprentices. So there's supporting activities that can also be funded. So you've got your big picture, your big project funding, and that's your focus, excuse me, but there's also those little smaller activities or low-hanging fruit that we call them, that can really add up, those smaller 5, 10, 15K grants, that get a few of those to bolster what you're doing can really make a huge difference. And also when maximising funding potential, think about grants as a way to just loosen up your cash flow, because you may want money for a certain thing, but if there is no money for that, but there's money for something totally different or something else, then the money you were originally going for can be kind of subsidised or buoyed with freeing up cash flow by getting money from somewhere totally different that you've never even thought about. So it's just about moving around that cash flow. There may not be grants for exactly what you need or want, but look at some other supporting activities. And that's where we talk with you. We dive a lot deeper into, okay, you've got vision of this, but hey, we're hearing this and so many other things. So let's look at all those supporting activities that can be funded as well. And look, I'm sure there's more than one grant that you could apply for. And if you are applying for one grant, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to apply for others. It is very much a case of, you know, you need the stimulus, you need the money, it pads out the full project. So don't think you can only apply for one grant at a time. You can have multiple applications in as well. As I mentioned before, your co-contribution, you may have to, you know, commit to that 50% up of a really bigger grant. So are you able to do that? So, you know, how could you co-contribute? What sort of evidence do you have to actually produce that? And I mentioned before, programs versus cash. So a lot of people want grant funding. Obviously, they want that cash injection, but don't discount the programs that government offer as well. So in that startup phase, that kind of first 1, 2 years, sometimes 3 years of a business, government's not going to dish out a lot of cash to you when you're at that early stage of business. You may not succeed, so government's not going to actually give you a lot of money if you can close the doors the next day. So the programs are generally there in that first incarnation of your business, and don't discount them, because they're an amazing way to not only help your business grow and to understand your business, but it introduces you to some really valuable key people of influence and like-minded business owners as well. So programs are a great way to keep your toe in the water, understand the industry, meet some wonderful people, and still be a part of that grant landscape while you're growing. And then once you hit from startup to growth stage, that's when you tend to find the money starts to kick in, the actual cash opportunities kick in. It's really important talking about funding is that don't overestimate your business project funding and don't underestimate it either, because that could be a difference between being successful or not. So if you're asking, once again, I'll go back to a manufacturing plant as an example. If you're saying, oh, I need, you know, $7 million to build this plant and it's only X feet by X feet, the figures aren't going to match up. The numbers aren't going to compute. It's like, wow, why do you need 7 mil for something that small? And on the other side, if you're like, we want to build this big manufacturing plant, but, you know, we only want 20K. It's like, well, 20K is not going to cut it. So you need to really do your figures, map out the actual costs of funding to get your project up and running and off the ground, because that will be scrutinised in the application process. And as I said, that could make the difference between moving on to the next round or not. So really make sure you've scoped out the full cost of this project that you want grant funding for. Another thing too is it's really important to understand that competitive nature. I spoke about that before. Use the first couple of grants to just dip your toe in the water. There's often a stigma around grants. It's like, oh my God, where do I find them firstly? But once I find them, how do I approach this? Where do I go? What do I do? Am I eligible? Am I not? What do they need? How long is it going to take? With everything in life, just jump into that first one, rip that Band-Aid off, and just for fun, just apply for a few grants so that you get that momentum, you get an understanding of, oh, that actually wasn't so bad. I just had to follow the bouncing ball. I had to answer the questions and I had to add certain documents. And then it just kind of takes away that real barrier and that, helps to demystify that grant landscape. So I just think, for fun, by the end of the year, if you just want to apply for one grant, to really, as I said, just rip that Band-Aid off so that you understand that, it's not such a bad thing to do. There's a lot of grants out there that are do it yourself, which means they're quite simple. So you should do it yourself. Others will be rated as quite easy, very hard, difficult, need help. So you'll see the grant ratings. So really, I challenge you before the end of the year to just apply for a simple little grant. Could be a local council grant as opposed to a big federal grant, but just find something and just go through that process. The grant application forms will also have minimum and maximum characters. Make sure that you really stick to those guidelines. If they're giving you an opportunity to tell, 500 characters about yourself, use them all up. Don't just use 100. And obviously, if they only give you 500, don't go waffling on and try and get 1,000 in there. So really be quite succinct. And by applying for a few grants just as a test, that will help you with your narrative. And your narrative is one of the really key important factors to your success, telling the story the way it needs to be read. And that's very important. Some grants also are expression of interest first up. So you're not invited to actually apply for the grant. You're invited to actually tell your story and just talk about the project you need funding. And if that sparks an interest, you will then be invited to actually go through the application process. So there's a lot of movement, as I mentioned before, in the grant landscape. There's a lot of things to consider. But the first place to start is what we've talked about today in terms of being grant ready. Make sure you've got everything in line, your documentation in line, make sure your project is clear. Take the I out of the project conversation and think about how this can actually help flow on community. I've created this amazing medical device, and it's not because I want money so I can make an extra million this year. This medical device could save lives. So I want money because I want to help the health of Australia. I want to take this international. I want to be able to manufacture this device I've just created, not in China anymore. I want to bring it back home to Australia and help stimulate the Australian economy. So remembering that grants are a way for government to stimulate their policies, and think about economy, think about Australian economy and local community. Grants are also very much state, local and federally funded. So depending on what state you're in, but also a national overarching search. Different states have different funding available, but also regional versus metro versus country. So there's many different areas that we need to look at, consider and map out for you. Where are you? Where are you, wanting to spend this money? What are you spending the money for? There's quite a big checklist that we need to go through, but that helps then alleviate a lot of the guesswork for you. So you're not thinking, oh my God, Madonna said there was 3,900 grants. Can I apply for all of them? We can dissect all that and really focus you. And it's like, you're based in Victoria, so you're only allowed Victorian-based grants or national grants. But if you do have offices in other states, then we can, certainly include New South Wales. If you want to consider moving interstate, but you don't know whether to go to South Australia or Queensland, let's have a look at what state government is offering, and we can look at those two different states in terms of grant possibilities, so it can help make an educated decision around what your next move might actually be. Finally, too, I always make sure that you are aware of what your local council is offering. Local council receives a lot of money per year and they need to spend it within their local community. So depending where your business is, you make sure council is aware of you, and I want you to make sure that you're aware of your local council, because they have a lot of programs, a lot of opportunities. They have individual grants. Admittedly, they're a little bit smaller, but still, it's a great way to, once again, just cut your teeth on a few little applications, make sure they're aware of you and you're aware of them. Grants too in the local government space, local government space are very much, they get allocated a certain funding per year. If they don't spend it, they've got to give it back. And then that's reduced from their next year's round of funding. So quite often around May, June, you'll find that your local councils are giving away quite a bit of funding in terms of opportunities and programs and cash injections for business. So make sure if the first thing you do from today, and the key takeaway from today, is go and sign up to your local council's newsletter so that you know exactly what is on offer from them at any given point or time. So here are a few grants that I think a lot of us should be aware of. The first one is the Export Marketing and Development Grant. This is where you get up to 50% back of your marketing spend if you are wanting to take your product or service outside Australia or New Zealand. So if you have grand plans one day of actually selling your product or selling your service to any other country except Australia or New Zealand, the cost involved in you actually trying to open those doors or trying to make those connections, you would get 50% back on that marketing spend. So if world domination is a future plan for you, then the Export Marketing and Development Grant is something you should really consider. The Research and Development Tax Incentive, this is something that most businesses should be aware of, because 9 times out of 10, there is a lot of research and development being done within your business on a day-to-day basis, and people just put it down as normal activities. But with the Research and Development Tax Incentive and the Export Grant, as I mentioned before, those top two are your given grants. So they have different criteria, different eligibility, but they are 2 grants that you should definitely write down and do some research on after today, and we can certainly help you. I've got a team that specialises in the Export Grant and a team that specialises in R&D, but because they're the 2 given grants, they should really be things that you look at. And then some of the real wonderful basic opportunities for business and non-for-profit in Australia is around innovation and growth, commercialisation. And when I'm talking about product, I'm also talking about services. There's no difference between a product and a service. It is an offering. It is an IP that you are trying to sell and you're trying to improve upon. So innovation, commercialisation for that product or service is very important. Female founded, I know there's some gentlemen on board today as well, but there is some really wonderful stimulus for female founded businesses. So that's a wonderful area in which you can look at to help expand your business if your business is owned by 51% female. And then some of the men out there listening, you may have to give that 1% up to your female partner so that you can tap into some different grants. But that's a really wonderful space to look at. Tourism, a lot of people don't really understand that their business could be a local cafe, but if they're bringing in local tourism, if they're bringing in interstate travellers, even overseas opportunities to their business, and there could be some opportunities around tourism and events, and that's where the narrative of the grant application is really important. You can spin it. You might think I'm just running this beautiful cafe down on the Mornington Peninsula, but if there's a tourism arm or a tourism bent or an opportunity to maybe put an event on once a month with wine tasting, cheese and a guitarist, well, that could step you into an event space opportunity. So padding out and expanding and thinking outside the box, getting creative is really important because it just opens up so many other opportunities and arms of grants. Manufacturing is huge. There's a lot of stimulus for manufacturing, and I used that as an example earlier, but then the plant and equipment comes in on the back of that. No point having a beautiful manufacturing space if it's not outfitted correctly with plant and equipment. So they're those kind of sub-activities that we can look at. Wages and apprenticeships, there's a lot of stimulus for wage subsidies. So if you're at that point where you're needing to grow, but you need that staff, that extra pair of hands to help you, then looking at what is available around wage and apprenticeships would be really invaluable. Doesn't have to be a full-time person. It can be someone part-time. I think 20 hours a week is the minimum. So there's some wonderful opportunities. You can get up to $25,000 back on the wages. So that's really important to look at. First Nations, there's a beautiful stimulus around at the moment for your First Nations, Indigenous, Aboriginal businesses that are starting and being funded. First Nations are doing some beautiful things in the food and bev industry and the beauty industry. They're two industries that I really, really love. I've come from the beauty world, 40 odd years ago. And of course, who doesn't like wine and food and chocolate? So that's another area that we work a lot in. But First Nations are really doing some beautiful, beautiful work there. So I'm not sure if there's, some sparks there, but that's a really wonderful space to look at. And then just basic general business growth. You are an Australian business. You are an Australian non-for-profit. So you are entitled to assistance if your project has that beautiful flow-on effect. Really important to note too, I've spoken about non-for-profit and for-profit. They're two separate pools of funding. So for-profit businesses are funded and non-for-profit community sector and social enterprise are funded with a different pool of funding. And you need different eligibility criteria for those two. Generally in that non-for-profit space, you need your DGR status, etc. One thing that's really important to understand is you can actually reverse engineer some grant opportunities. So if you partnered with a non-for-profit, or if a non-for-profit partnered with a for-profit, then the two of you could dip into both pools of funding. And if the non-for-profit had an opportunity, they could apply for funding that they then use to engage your business to carry out their project, and vice versa. If a business has a wonderful project and opportunity, but there's no funding in the business sector, but there's funding in the non-for-profit sector, the business can actually apply for it and support and use the non-for-profit. So really think about how you could partner with a non-for-profit, or if there are non-for-profits on here today, think about how you could partner with a business that obviously needs to align with your values, your core values, your beliefs, your future plans. But it's a really beautiful way to really coexist and just create some magic from both sides of the fence. So I think that kind of wraps up this morning and what I wanted to speak about, because I don't want to overload you too much. There is a lot of information to be taken in, and there's a lot of road to be travelled. But as they say, the journey starts with that first step. So I'm hoping today that this gives you a little bit more of a clearer overview and helps demystify, take away that shock horror thought. When people say grants, people break out in a cold sweat. So don't be afraid of it. It's money, lots of money. It's there for you. If you're entitled to it, you should be putting your hand up. And as I said, really, two things I want you to take away from today. As soon as we hang up, I want you to actually go and subscribe to your local council newsletter. And I also would love you to find a grant and even just apply for it this side of Christmas, just so it takes away that really crazy first step that you must have been dreading. So I'm happy to open the floor to questions now. If there's any questions, or if somebody wants to talk about, their growth project and how it could be funded, maybe I could use that as a case study to just give you a little bit of an idea of how we work and how we drill down. But yeah, Jeff, I'd love to hand it back to you now and see if there's any questions.
Donna, thank you. I'll get Rod to bring up any of the questions that have been raised. Just from a personal point of view, I'm pleased you mentioned the three